Right. Welcome, everybody, to Real Change Live special this evening. We are following on from last week's Real Change with Dr. Bill Pettit, who is our resident psychiatric mental health pioneer. And he's been taking us through a series of mental diagnoses and helping understand how the mind works in relationship to these and how there can be hope for real change. So he's been taking us through from a psychiatric point of view how the mind works from his professional experience, and then pointing back to an understanding of the mind that when people have it, they notice that their experience of their mental health challenges completely changes, and that they have much more well-being more often and a deeper sense of peace. And so what we have tonight is a really special edition, because normally it's Dr. Bill. He talks to us about the diagnoses. Last week it was suicidal ideation. He then talks a little bit about how the mind works and then shares stories. Well, tonight we are incredibly blessed to have some people with us who are going to share their own story of what they've been through. And we should have three of us. There's definitely two of us who are going to share, and if not, there'll be three. What they're going to be doing tonight is telling you a little bit about what life was like for them before they understood how their mind worked and their experience was created, and then what insight they had and how life looks now. So we're going to hear their stories tonight. And for anybody who's really new to this understanding and might have shared this podcast because they wanted to help somebody, or they're watching it because they thought they wanted to understand more about some relief from their own suicidal ideation, I just wanted to touch base with you briefly about this understanding that we'll be talking about tonight, this understanding of the mind, and really represent Dr. Bill's perspective on this, having worked for 30 or 40 years with every kind of diagnosis. He came across an understanding of the mind that really pointed in a direction that was the opposite of the diagnostic manual, and was in fact where, instead of creating more labels and more sort of different ways in which people would experience mental dysfunction, he saw through this understanding of the mind that actually there is only one mental illness. Now that's quite a bold claim, but the single mental illness is actually chronic mental stress or a bad feeling. And the chronic part comes about through not understanding where that feeling is coming from. So a low mood experienced over time will create more low mood and more low feeling and more low thinking, which will, at the extreme end, go on to create the mental health disorders that we are familiar with. So I really strongly recommend listening to the podcast series from Dr. Bill, which I'll send a link about. In particular, the first one, he talks about this chronic mental stress and how all experience is created through the power of thought in the moment. And that when we see that in our operation in ourselves, we start to get a glimpse of how we are creating our own experience. And I'm gonna leave it to our storytellers to go a little bit more into that for themselves. But I really want to give you just a few kind of clues to that there's this power that we're all using to create our experience, and it can be our friend if we learn to understand how it works. So that's my intro for tonight, and I'm going to leave some of our storytellers to tell a little bit more. And I can see that Becky's joined us, which I'm very happy to see. Hi, Becky. Wasn't sure.
Had a technical problem.
I did wonder. So let me just introduce our three speakers who are just so generous to give not only their time tonight, but they've all offered, as a result of this subject, if there's anybody in need who would need someone to talk to and is feeling a little desperate, they have all offered to be available for a call to support people. Now there's a limit to their time, but so I'll be the gatekeeper. But basically, if there's somebody that that needs help, or indeed yourself, these speakers have been really generous. So I'm just going to introduce all three of them, and then our first speaker a little bit more. So tonight we have Pete Bailey, who probably from a very young age experienced depression and suicidal thinking a lot of his life, and fairly recently, in the last 2 years, came across this understanding. So he's going to tell us a little bit about his experience before that and what he's seen as a result of it. And I have to say, and I'll say a bit more about Pete in a minute. And then the next speaker is my friend Becky Boazman. And Becky herself, see, oftentimes with mental health diagnoses, we kind of make an exception out of really difficult circumstances. If someone's had terrible circumstances in their youth, then we can kind of understand, or we think maybe that's why they have the disorders they have. Well, what's interesting about Becky's story is she'll tell you it, but she had a very traumatic start to life, and some pretty terrible things happened to her, and she had a lot of diagnoses and went to see a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists. And it wasn't until she came across this understanding that she started to get a sense of peace and freedom and relief from her past story. So she's got a very powerful story to tell. And then finally, we're going to finish with Andrew Bridgewater, who is a chartered psychologist. So, somebody pretty interested in how the mind worked, probably thought he knew a thing or two about how things worked. But despite all his knowledge, he also found himself in his own state of low mood thinking and struggling. And I'll leave him to go into the details of his story. But I think it's really powerful to hear from a mental health professional who realized that everything he already knew, that wasn't enough to create freedom for him, but this understanding did. So we're going to finish with Andrew. But first off, we're going to hear from my lovely, lovely friend Pete. And I got to tell you, Pete is the sweetest man. He's got a heart of God, and he's been we've met on loads of occasions, and he has the simple, clear, beautiful wisdom, and yet behind a backstory of a lot of stuff. So I'm going to leave it to Pete now. That's how life was before he had this understanding. Over to you, Pete. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'll wind the clock back then from, for as long as I can remember, I was always very anxious, very quiet. Felt that my family treated me, shunned me, some other people. Found out I was legitimate when I was older, so that explains that. But although I was very quiet, I was a good student at school until I was 14, and then I was abused, which then meant I started bunking off school, so I didn't really have much of an education for the last 2 years of my working life. So when I actually left school, I was in sort of minimum wage jobs always, and struggling to hold those down because I kind of got bullied by everybody because I was so screwed up in my own life. Probably wasn't getting bullied by anybody, but you imagine it, don't you? And I suppose from the age of my early 20s until I was 48, so nearly 30 years, I'd go in and out of this suicidal. I'd go 3 months, I'd be okay, and then a few weeks I'd just be in turmoil, and found it difficult to hold down jobs and build relationships. And I had all sorts of therapy, some private, some national health. I tried all the different, ABC treatments, and nothing worked until this one day I found a new doctor, and his wife had done some training with Ian Watson. His wife was a 3P practitioner, and he said, "This is your prescription." He wrote down Sid Banks' website, And he said, look at that, and then look at the different practitioners and watch all the videos and see what resonates with you. And he went, I won't need to see you again. So that evening, that's what I did. And I spent a couple of hours. I discovered Judy Sedgman. She sort of explained what the principles were. So I got the language and I was taking notes. And then I got bored and I picked up a book, which I was reading, but left YouTube in the background. And I heard somebody say something. My mood just lifted. It was like like an electrical surge in a way. It just went up from my solar plexus, just left me, and I had this big smile on my face, and I thought, what have I just heard? So I played back the video clip, and it was Mara Gleason, and she said words to the effect of, "Life is like a movie, but the mind works like a projector, not a camera." And when she said that, I just had this vision of how I'd been making up, using my imagination against me with all these situations, imagining a horror story and living there. Whereas it's funny because I sort of relived in my mind some of the situations I'd been in. But imagine being in a better mood at the time and how different the outcome would have been. Like, I hadn't got angry at that point, hadn't broken that, hadn't walked away from that, hadn't said something to somebody, or hadn't resigned from a job because it was getting on top of me. And I just saw this. It was like dominoes falling in my mind. It was like I was watching the movie of my own life, but with a different outcome. That was September 2016, so sort of 17 months now, I suppose. And I woke up the next day and I was hopeful. I was out of work at the time, but I knew I'd find a job. I knew I'd enjoy it because whatever was put in front of me, I'd handle it. And I did a couple of temporary contracts. One was in a bank, and another was at Marks and Spencer. Another was at the Department of Work and Pension, which was a voluntary thing. So this was all working with the public. I mean, up to this point, I was very anxious and quiet, but I just felt that I'd seen something that I knew I wasn't anxious anymore, and I wanted to test it and go out there. And now I'm working for Marks and Spencer full time, so I'm dealing with customer public. And one of my roles is to take in the delivery in the morning. So to back the lorry in, to have those conversations with the commuters who are getting angry, to stay calm with them, which is not like the old me at all. And basically my life's completely different than it was before, because nothing, although I can get angry, I don't stay down. I know it's my thought. If I'm angry with something, I know that to stay there, I've got to keep thinking it, so I let it go. And it's changed completely. And I've been into a prison now, addiction centres, and just volunteering to share this with anybody who's willing to listen.
Beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit about the insight that you had, Pete, that really had you see that life, the way you'd put it together, that there was another way to see life, the way you put it together?
It was like a vision, really, that I'd actually I remembered some of the things that I'd been through, some of the conversations, some of the arguments and so on. But whereas I used to look back on these situations and I'd have the same feelings of anxiety, pit of the stomach and that kind of thing, I was able to look back on these situations in a calm manner and know that if I was in the same situations in the future, I'd stay calm and I wouldn't you know, it was like literally I took Mara's words. I created a movie. Now I was looking at a happier film than the one I've lived through.
It's like you saw the power of your thoughts to create your own experience of your life as if it were a movie.
Yeah. It's like
Wow.
a scene that I used my imagination against myself.
Beautiful.
Whereas now I just don't use my imagination. Whatever's in front of me, I do the best I can with that. And that's it, really. Don't plan very much. Because I was constantly planning, checking my bank balance, you know, every day. I mean, now I just think, put the bill money to one side and then spend the rest. And I know that if I run out of this sort of savings account, I know the bills are paid. As before, I'd really really worry every day for 30 days or however many days there were in that month that the bills would be paid, which is crazy. But I didn't know anything.
So when you talk about your imagination, I guess there might be people listening who have a lot of thinking about the future and about what might go wrong, and that makes them feel low and anxious and frightened. What would you say to that now from your own experience?
Now I tend not to have a lot of thought about anything anymore. I mean, like tomorrow, Saturday, I've got to be at work at 5 a.m. because it's Christmas. It's the Saturday before Christmas, and that'll be a pain. And but I just think, well, it isn't Saturday morning at 5 a.m. yet. Whereas before, I'd probably have a lot of thought about, I shouldn't have to do this. And I think that's what I do. I stop judging situations.
Judging.
May not like a situation. Judging, yeah. May not like a situation, but I think there's some situations, if you question this, whatever it is, you can change it. Like you buy a product, it's substandard, you take it back to the shop. And there's other things like your boss wants you in at 5 a.m. on Saturday. You can't do anything about it. Those situations, I just let go. I just put up with it. Whereas before, I'd still be thinking about it in 6 months' time that you go in at 5 a.m. So I think that's the difference. It's like the serenity prayer. The things I cannot change, I let go. That's it. But then things I can change, I will speak up. Calmly though. Whereas before I'd sort of be angry and kick off. Whereas now I'll calmly ask if can something be done about the situation. And if it can't, then I accept that. That goes back to the serenity. So.
Beautiful. So Pete, do you still get low moods from time to time? Do you sometimes feel in a low mood?
There are occasions, yes. I think what I've noticed now though, it's almost like moods go up and down anyway. And I think that if so sometimes somebody may say something that I don't like the sound of. I'm in a low mood already. That's going to have more of an effect than if I was in a higher mood. But I tend to, when I'm in a low mood, there's a point in which I realise my thinking, my judgment of whatever the situation is keeping me in the mood, and then I just let it go. And I don't know how I do that because it's not like there's a mechanism, but it's almost like I have an insight in that moment that, that's what I'm doing. And I see it like a compass point that it suddenly goes back up. The funny thing is, I mean, it's not funny, but so I've known about this. So I've been very calm. I've had my insight, and life's improved over the last sort of 15 months. I can still have a suicidal thought, but it's isolated. That just tells me that I'm spending too much time worrying about maybe a deadline or something, and then I just go, let it go, and then focus again on whatever I'm doing.
Mm.
And it's amazing how resilient I've become. And what I find is quite amusing, though, the thing that used to upset me, though, someone saying with a certain attitude, saying something that, say, a customer was rude, I'm compassionate to them now. I just think, oh, they must be in a low mood, rather than be indignant.
Mm.
And it's brilliant. I don't, and for that reason, I don't stay there. And sometimes I can bring them up with me, that they've been stroppy, and I smile at them and say, whatever. You know, I think it rubs off on them as well.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you, Pete. Thank you so much. I want to give the other two a chance for their stories too. But I think your story really shows how one thought really can change everything. See what I did there? But it's true.
And one solution. I mean,
Yeah.
two good names of companies that she's founded.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
sharing, Pete.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to ask Pete and all the speakers tonight some questions at the end. So, but I want to give Becky a chance. Now, I just have to say, Becky, we could probably do a 2-hour show on Becky's life, couldn't we, Becky? So I am going to try and keep you to 10 minutes. I might have to let you know.
Okay.
At some point. Yeah. I'll just kind of, well, everyone else can see me too, you know, so.
Okay.
But just briefly, I had the pleasure of, now I'm going to go on and on, and I can't do this because we haven't got time, but I remember the first time I met Becky was at a 3P conference. And I was very new to the principles, and I was wandering around looking a little lost, and she just befriended me and looked after me. And I kept thinking, why is this person being so nice to me? But I think we were just destined to be friends, really. And I've worked with Becky and seen her work in groups, and her story, and I've interviewed her, and her story is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, every horrible thing that can happen to a person pretty much happened to Becky. So if you could tell us a little bit about what happened to you, as much as you feel comfortable to share, and then you came across this understanding in the probation situation, and then you had it had a big impact on you, and then you had an insight, and then now how life looks for you now. So over to you, Becky. We'd love to hear your story, and also what kind of low mood thinking you had as well before you had your insight. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi everybody, my name's Becky Boazman. I at the age of 6 was kidnapped and sexually abused, and that was the start of me turning into a different person, I should say. And all my life I've struggled from the age of 6 to continue in life in a different, in actually a normal way, I should say. I didn't know how to deal with this this thing that had happened to me. A lot of people were rallying round, and the police and detective and things. I didn't know how to control it or how to feel. Nobody ever spoke to me about that sort of thing. So you do the best you can, and I decided to try and protect myself, blocking things out and not letting people in, building a secret wall around me. I used to have some really low moods as a child, well, all my life really, and I used to get angry, I used to get aggressive. I've had suicidal thoughts from a very early age, at the age of 6, and feeling of not being wanted, not being loved, not all kinds that you could imagine. Tried to harm myself a lot, run away from home, from boarding school. I was always missing school because I was at doctor's or a psychiatrist or a clinic or something. So I was brought up thinking that, okay, this is normal, that you're that you've got a label on your head. My mum even used to introduce me to people and her friends as, this is my problem child. And it's sort of stuck with me, really, I suppose. I didn't know really what I was. So mostly all my life, I've had trouble with relationships, anger issues. My life's been up and down. Sometimes it's happy. I'll have spates of being really happy, then it goes really low, happy and low. And but not knowing how to get out of those situations. And through all my life, from the age of 6, I'm 51 now, had lots of suicidal thoughts. I've been to that many clinics, that many doctors. I was on prescribed Valium at the age of 12. So I was on lots of different tablets they tried me with. And experiments, tablets, this and that, psychologists, psychiatrists. Nobody could give me the answer. But basically, I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I was looking for or what was happening, really. Anybody that's had these kind of problems that's out there, that have been abused or something that's happened to them that they don't want to happen or they don't understand it, what do you do? So you just go on with life thinking, I'll just take this baggage on board, and you carry it into all your life. Unfortunately for me, I ended up getting into trouble quite a lot of times in my life because it came into anger, and I decided that I wasn't worth anything, and basically I was damaged goods and nobody wanted me. And you just go on through life thinking really that your self-worth isn't worth anything. The amount of times I've tried to kill myself, probably not really wanting to do it, it's just for a bit of someone to notice, say, hey, look, you know, I'm suffering here, tell me how to get over it. I've had that many low days. I've spent, as an adult, I've spent weeks and months under a duvet, and I've tried drugs, I've tried alcohol, I've tried you name it, I've done it, and nothing's worked. And I got to my old age, into my 40s, thinking, well, I'm still having all these feelings. They keep coming back no matter what I do, no matter what tablet I take, what doctor I go to. I'm still having these things going on. And I ended up getting into trouble seriously about and a lot of it was to do with my violence coming back, because I couldn't control my thoughts, anger, and my emotions. And I felt really misunderstood in life, to be honest. And as far as I can remember, I was always a happy, lucky child, lovable, who loved people, cared for people. And I couldn't see where I was going wrong, and I didn't know what was happening, but it just kept following me. This life kept appearing, and the baggage got heavier and heavier. And in the end, my marriage broke down. And this was they say then the final nail, you know, it knocked me down, because when people with the issues that I've had all my life, when everything gets on top of you, it gets on top of you in a way that you can't get back, and you go right back into your hole again. And I just thought, well, this is it, you know, there's no going back from this. And I got into trouble. I ended up on probation, and I felt awful about that. Another time I've let my family down again, and my friends and myself. But woe and behold, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I went on a course that was run by Janet Lindsay, that now Riney, and she was delivering a program called the Aim for Women program, and she was teaching the 3 principles. which I didn't know what it was at the time. And I thought, well, I have to go, so I'll go. And she started to talk in this lesson, and I was there, and I thought, okay, I'll just give it an open ear. And I heard something for the first time that was possible, that this could do something. And so I went back the next week, and what I heard was just, well, it was my insight of my life changing. And it was the only way I could explain it to people is like somebody had sprinkled fairy dust on top of me, and I'd gone all goose pimply and felt, whoa, hang on a minute, this is a sherbet moment. This is really an eye-opener here. Am I getting this right? Have I just heard this? And basically what I heard was that did happen to me when I was younger, and it was very real, and I know that because I was there, but there's nothing I can do about it now, because it happened so many years ago. Even if I wanted to do something about it, I couldn't. And basically Janet was telling me in the words that she was using that we are responsible for our own thoughts and our own thinking, and if you understand the nature of your own thoughts and thinking, you can change the way you think. And I started, oh my God, I started thinking so differently. And I kept thinking, actually, I really haven't got a clue what you're on about, Janet, but it feels good, and it made me feel different. So I went home after that session, and my probation officer rang me up on the night time, and I'll never forget, it was 7 o'clock. And because you don't normally get that, and I thought, somebody's bothering about me here. Someone's bothered to see if I'm okay. And she said, are you okay? I said, I feel fantastic. I don't know what it was, but I feel great. And I want to come next week. And that's it. And then I realised on the way home when I was crying that I was releasing all this stuff that I'd got inside me, that I'm going to be okay, you know. I feel that this is a breakthrough here. There's a, you know, like when you've had a big storm and you get a gap in the clouds where the sun shines through. That was my moment, and I've never looked back. And it's the best thing that's ever happened, and it saved my life, because actually I would either be in prison now or dead. And me going to that course, when at that time listening the way I did, it changed my life. And it was just a breakthrough for me to know you can change your thinking, you can change your thoughts, and look at things in a different way. And I used to say, no, why didn't someone tell me before? I've suffered all this time, all these, you know, but I wouldn't be me in that way. And the way I look at it is, okay, so what do I do now? I can't do nothing about the past. So I've learned to do what I can do now. And I wouldn't let Janet go. I used to say, right, I'm not letting you go. And I used to say, I'm going to hang on to your ankles, and I'm following you everywhere. And I want to know about these 3 principles. And so I actually did do that, followed around everywhere. And in the end, where I got employed by Janet, and I got a contract for probation in Warsaw, and then we got other contracts, and then I ended up having another job in probation. And I just thought, well, where did that come from? It's just absolutely amazing feeling. And don't get me wrong, I've had doctors and psychiatrists, psychologists tell me I've got a mental health issue for the rest of my life. I probably have. Some people have addictions the rest of their life, and they say once you're an alcoholic or an addict, you've got to be careful for the rest of your life. But I don't have half as many problems as I used to. I mean, hardly anything really. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have mood swings, I have ups and downs, but that's normal, because life isn't normal. You know, you don't live on a flat line. Your life is up and down, and it's how I deal with it now. So basically, I can have really bad days, and I think I'm really feeling sorry for myself today. And I think, do you know what? I know I'm feeling sorry for myself, and I can turn it round, and I know that okay, it's going to be okay, and I appreciate what I've got now. I appreciate that I can use the principles and think, I'm just getting caught up in my thinking. I know what I'm doing, and it's wasted energy because I've been trained now with the principles. I did a long course on it, and basically because I know the nature of my thoughts, the nature of the thinking, I can turn them. Just like you can sit and look at the clouds and know that the clouds are in the sky, but you don't stand there walking, looking at them all the time. You're just aware they're there. And that's what I realise now. I'm aware they're there. I'm aware my thoughts can be good, bad, whatever. And I know that they can be good, bad, but I know it can be twisted round into a good. Always use a positive. Because it's like putting a DVD on. It's like you can put a happy movie on. And if you want to change it, you just take it out and you put a sad one on, or you put a horror film on, and it is as easy as just switching on and off. And I have a lot of time for a lot of people. I have a lot of time for people who need talking to, and that's why I go around helping people, helping others, because I don't want anybody to suffer all the 40 odd years I did, when they can get the answer from us and we can share the free principles, and people don't have to suffer. It's so easy once you know the nature of the thoughts and our moods and things and how they work. Everyone can be a better person, and it's an understanding as well. It's understanding how you're feeling and what makes you tick and what makes this work. And I can honestly say that I'm a trouble-free person, really. I'm
Becky,
changed.
that's a great place for us to start. What I really hear in your story is how you really, really thought you were broken and that there was something wrong with you, and you really lived in the reality of that truth as a sort of shameful secret. And that when you came across these principles, you really saw that that was not true, and that you had something guiding you, that we all have guiding us, this principle of mind that you can draw on, that is part of gives you wisdom and access to wisdom. And that you can absolutely trust that, and that and you were looking for something to trust, and outside you couldn't find it, and then when you came across these principles, you found something inside you could trust. That's what I love about it.
And it was there all along. It was all in me. And it wasn't that Janet gave it to me. Nobody can give it to me. I had to see it for myself, and that's the way you can. I can't give it to anybody. I can guide them. Like if I shine a torch in the dark and say, this is where we're going, and they have to come and see it for themselves. And that's the fantastic thing, that you discover it for yourself, which is even better because it's your thing. And it's already, when you discover it and think, oh gosh, that was it. And, but it's the most, I can honestly say it's the most fantastic feeling I've ever had. And the most fantastic thing I'm involved with, because everybody that I've met involved in it are just fantastic people.
Oh, thanks, Becky. I'm going to want to give some time to Andrew now, but thank you, and hopefully there'll be some time for some questions at the end.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming, Becky, and your story.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, I think you've muted yourself, actually.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So I just want to introduce you all to Andrew. So it's because of Andrew we're having this tonight, and I really seriously hope that this podcast touches someone's life and gives them hope in a dark time. And if it does, it will be Andrew that you have to thank, because he came to me and said, I'd really like to tell my story and offer hope to people who have been really struggling with depression and suicidal thinking. And so I want to finish with Andrew, and I think particularly it's interesting to hear from him because as a psychologist himself, he had all the information, and yet didn't have access at that moment in time to the insight when he found himself in a low state of mind until he did. So tell us about your story, Andrew. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, it's great to be able to talk to everyone this evening. I feel very humble, actually, just listening to Becky and Pete's stories, because they're two amazing people who've come through some incredible things. I suppose I'd been a depressive all my life, and there were 3 occasions in life, actually looking back on it now, I'm now 56, 3 occasions when I either felt suicidal or attempted suicide. One was when I was 16, when I just completed my O-levels, which should have been a time of great joy and relief, but wasn't. The other was at early stages of career when I left accountancy and felt very low because I'd failed at something, quotes, I'd never failed at anything in my life before at that point. And I came from a very achieving family. And most recently, about 12 years ago, when I found myself in a psychiatric hospital for 5 weeks with what's called psychotic depression. Psychotic depression being where the sufferer loses touch with reality and you imagine all sorts of sounds, sights, tastes and smells that aren't real. Very frightening, and the only way I can describe it is like a living nightmare, which went on for several weeks. So that's the very brief sort of journey. But I guess I decided to train as a psychologist. First of all, I was about 35 when I made the decision. So I'd had careers before in accountancy, IT, project management. But I kind of felt that I needed fixing. And I don't know if anybody listening to this can relate to that thing, but I felt that there were things about my life that just weren't right. And that one major crisis in my life could tip me into suicidal thoughts and depression because it had happened before. And I was kind of living on a bit of the edge of a precipice in the sense that any serious circumstance I felt could unhinge me. And that's a pretty frightening place to live your life from. And what I've found is that since I've discovered this understanding, the complete opposite is true. Whereas still in the sort of mental health fraternity, there is a sense that if you've been damaged at some point in your life, you're damaged and you will be vulnerable. And I find that a very unhelpful paradigm and a very unhelpful place from which to operate. And I'll say I would conjecture the complete opposite now because that's been my experience. So life for me before the principles, lots of challenges. Inevitably, life has its ups and downs, but life hasn't all been down. There were lots of high moments. But rock bottom was when I was in hospital, and in a psychiatric hospital in Warwick back in 2006, psychotic. Now, what got me there was a thought process, and this is why it's so fascinating with the principles. And I can remember the moment it started. It's so crazy that I can remember it. I bought an investment property, wanted to do better financially for my family. We bought an investment property, my wife and I, with a big mortgage in Cyprus, and the market crashed. And I went on the internet late December, about this time of year in 2005, to check the prices of the properties that I just bought. And I noticed that they were 25% lower than the price that I paid with a heavy mortgage. So we were into negative equity. I couldn't rent it because the market was saturated with properties. And to add insult to injury, Cyprus pound went into the euro at a very strong rate and my mortgage payments doubled. Long story short, I made myself crazy with my own low mood thinking. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from about December, this time of year, 2005, right through to when I was admitted to hospital on the 18th of April, 2006. And I remember the dates very well because they were I wrote about this afterwards. I wrote about my psychotic experience because it was so powerful. And with psychosis, as I say, you literally lose touch with reality. So I had imagined that everybody was out to get me. I was paranoid. I was literally imagining that I was bringing down the world financial system. I hadn't slept for about 4 weeks before I went into hospital. So that was kind of adding to my trauma and depressed feelings. And I literally wanted to end my life. And I can remember looking at the knife block in my mum's kitchen and thinking, well, if everybody would just go out of the room, I'll do it now. And I found myself saying this, feeling quite crazy because life has never been there since. And it hasn't all been plain sailing because what happened is I was on very heavy doses of antidepressant medication and antipsychotic medication, one of the side effects being heavy weight gain, and I was told to expect that, rather laughingly. And I can remember thinking, well, that's not very nice. That's not going to really help me improve my mood, is it? But lo and behold, for the next 18 months, I piled on 3.5 stone and managed to get myself back into work. In fact, I stacked shelves in my local co-op in 2 months of 2 weeks coming out of hospital because I just needed to get out there. I wanted to do something and start to integrate with society, because anybody who's had depression or is depressed will know that you just want to hide away. You don't want to have anything to do with anyone. And yet, actually, as part of my recovery, I started to want to get out there into society again. So I got back into corporate life. I had a very stressful training job all over Europe. And to cope with the stress, I used to drink half a bottle of wine a night. I'd eat heavily. And I remember getting into a lift at the end of the busy day's training in June 2007. So having come out of hospital in the May 2006, this is sort of 40 months later. And I looked at the fat, overweight, stressed out, middle-aged man in the lift. I was 44 at the time. And I thought, what on earth is going to become of me? And something happened at that point, and I come to realize it was a kind of point of willingness, a tipping point, a decision. Decision, the root being to cut oneself off from any other possibility. And I decided that I wasn't going to live like this anymore. So first of all, I decided that I was going to research everything I could find on natural remedies for dealing with depression. And there's an awful lot of really helpful lifestyle stuff out there. So much so that I actually ended up writing a book on it. And I called it Fit for Business, How to Deal with Stress and Create a Healthy Work-Life Balance, because some of the changes that I made to my health and nutrition were nothing short of miraculous. And I've got a bottle with wheatgrass and water in it here. And just taking 2 litres of that twice a day probably was on its own enough to lose 3.5 stone in a gentle slight edge fashion over 6 months, which is what it took me to lose the weight. But then not only that, I started to get energy and vitality that I hadn't experienced since my mid-20s. So that was just part of the journey. And that took me a long way. And then in about 2012, I came across a book by Michael Neal, The Inside Out Revolution, which I'm sure some people have come across. And I urge, if you're interested in this topic, do read it. It's a brilliant book. And I got about 15% of it. I thought, this is really intriguing. I need to read more. But just to rewind a little bit, the retraining as a psychologist, as I say, initially was about trying to fix myself. But unfortunately, it didn't, because 2005 was the year I qualified as a Chartered Psychologist. And if you've been hearing the dates, it was in the early part of 2006 when I became heavily depressed. So it wasn't, it wasn't my studies of psychology that were actually helping me cope with life. In fact, quite the opposite. It was what came after. And I think that's what's been so powerful for me. It's actually this understanding that I've unwrapped. And it took me a little while to unwrap it. So if anybody's listening to this thinking, well, this all sounds very intriguing, just let me wrap my head around it. You feel your way through it, rather like Becky was saying. Logically, you can't think it through. It's very difficult to make sense of logically. And I tried to make sense of it logically because that's what my psychology training had taught me to do. And that consequently, I rejected it on a number of levels. A, why haven't I heard about this? Because I spent 20 years studying psychology and it's never been mentioned. And B, why are these people so blooming happy when I'm not? It's not fair. But then people kept thrusting books into my hands and I just gradually got more and more immersed. And then about 15 months or so ago, I had a major insight. And my insight was around my psychosis. So you'd have heard me explain that, I became psychotic. So I was imagining sights, sounds, tastes and smells that were miles away from reality. And I was making those up through my own low mood thinking. I was literally creating an altered chemical state in my brain through consistent night and day low mood thinking. Doing just what Dr. Bill says, talk about chronic mental stress. Well, there was nowhere for my adrenaline and cortisol to go. It was flooding my system with toxicity. And to the extent that I became a psychotic. Now, that's a very scary place to be because when you're psychotic, you're a danger to yourself and potentially to other people. But that was created by consistent low mood thinking. And at that point, I thought, wow, I just had an exaggerated version of what we're all doing every moment of every day. I just went to the extreme. Well, not as an experiment, but just as a result of the circumstances that I perceived were causing me that stress. Now, it wasn't the circumstances, as I've come to to realize it was my thinking on my thinking on my thinking about those circumstances which literally got me into deep, deep trouble. So that was the insight, and I thought, wow, gosh, okay, I've now understood what happened to me on a very dramatic scale. Let me think if I can kind of integrate this into my life and start to help other people with it. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since, really. And feeling so blessed, as I know, Pete and Becky, you described that those challenges, those deep, deep challenges have turned out to be not only a profound awakening for me, but an opportunity for me to throw a rope to other people who find themselves in distress. It's a horrible, horrible place to be, but when we know how it's created and we understand the process of creation, we can stop doing it to ourselves. I always found it difficult to replace negative thought with a positive one. So techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy and neuro-linguistic programming never worked for me. I just found them too difficult, and I could never sort of practice enough and do it. But once I actually understood how I created my experience of life, and I could be aware of that in the moment, then the pressure just went away. And it's happened even this week. You know, circumstances have conspired to cause me to think, you know, outside in problems this week, but I just thought, okay, here I am. I'm just actually living in my thinking. It's not reality. None of my thinking is real. It's my own virtual reality created through my own thinking. I can let it go. Now, that for me has been more profound than any tablet I ever took, any cognitive behavioral therapy course I ever took, any coaching session I ever sat in on. So I am just thrilled to be able to share not only my story, but this understanding, because I think it's literally life-changing, not just on an individual level, but this week I was with a company in London doing a team event, and they sat there in awe as I talked this through. There was literally, you could hear a pin drop. This is going to change the world. I believe it will be Psychology 2.0, and I'm happy to talk about, you know, the challenges in doing that if you want to. But that's my brief story, and I just feel very blessed to be able to help others with challenges that I've worked through. Thank you.
I just want to give people there's a chance to ask any questions, and if we have time, I'd love to hear about Psychology 2.0. But you know, something so powerful in your story about how one simple insight, even though you knew a lot, even though you devoted time to studying the mind, how it worked, how illness, mental health was created, one thought in you changed everything and put it all together for you and changed your own experience. I think that's incredible. And if you can find that one thought, in this case, it was you saw that you were the creator of your experience. Incredible. So I just want to put it over to people to ask.
You've just gone mute again, Elizabeth.
Keep thinking I'm muting you and I'm muting myself.
That's all right.
You think I'd never done this before, or at least I've got the same pathology every time. At least I'm consistently bad. Right, how do I mute you then? That's very strange. Anyway, what I'd love to do is hear from anybody who's got a question, and you can either type it in the chat, or you can, if you go to the list of participants and you just go to your name, you should be able to raise your hand. So we'd love to hear any thoughts, comments, observations, or questions you have for any of our panel. Who's got something they'd like to ask or share? For a friend? Okay, beautiful. This is a fantastic question. Thank you, Robert. I believe that well-being is innate and that I don't need to be fixed. However, I don't know it. So they're pointing to that deeper intuitive knowing. It's like more of an intellectual knowing. At the end of the day, I still feel broken and in need of fixing. And I really remember that feeling this way myself. How do you folks make the transition from intellectually understanding this to actually realizing it? So who'd like to have a go at that? You want to go for it, Andrew? Look like you're nodding. Go on then.
Yeah, just briefly, and I'll give other people a chance. Don't try and intellectualize it. Don't try and understand it intellectually, which is what I did for a couple of years, and it didn't get me anywhere. That's why I didn't break through with my insights earlier. Trying to put this into an intellectual understanding, I just ended up wrapping myself to knots. And I can remember asking myself, what's mind again? How would I explain mind? And of course, it's a very difficult concept to wrap your head around. So I would say go with the feeling, Robert. It's great that you have that understanding at a level, and just watch out for your own everyday miracles. They're all around us. It's working all the time, 24/7, and it will start to percolate. I'd just be interested if anybody else wants to add to that.
That's a great answer. Pete, Becky, anything you would say to Robert?
Yeah, it's not, you can't really say it's intellectual. It's more of a feeling, and it's more of how you get it in, how you feel, you know, like some people, like, they can feel comfortable in one place and not another. You can walk into a shop and think, well, I don't feel comfortable here, but you can walk somewhere else and think, this is it. I feel really good here. It's about being comfortable in the space, and it's not an intellectual thing, but also to try and see clarity in your mind, letting new things into your mind to see clarity. Not thinking too much intellectual, you'll be filling your mind up with other things and not seeing the real true potential of the nature of thought.
Nicely answered. Anything you'd add, Pete?
I spend a lot of time in nature now. I go for long walks along the River Avon or the Lem, which is in Leamington. And I find there was this one day I went on this walk, and I didn't know where I was going to end up, and I didn't care, and that was really great. That I got to a point, I got to a crossroads, and I didn't overthink it. I just went, well, I'll go this way. I'll go to the left. And it was quite funny though, because everything went into slow motion at that point. It was just as if it was like having an insight about the oneness of, you know, people talk about the oneness mind. And the next thought I had was, I'm going to do this walk again, and next week I'm going to go the other way and see where it goes. And it was quite funny though, because the left fork took me to a pub that I knew, and then the next week when I went to the right fork, it took me to a main road that I knew. And I think it kind of taught me that we're only one step away from being from knowing what to do. We're always one thought away, aren't we? It's like you could sort of over intellectualize and think, well, what should I do next? Or just make a decision and keep going. If you go long enough in the wrong direction, your own sat nav will come in and correct you, I think. But basically, in a couple of words, try not to have everything on your mind unless you're doing something, and just think about that.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I've heard a few people say it really simply. That might be helpful to you, Robert, and it's really helped me. You're either home or you're away.
Yeah,
and home has a quality to it. It's kind of there is not much going on when you're home. There's a piece to it, and that's the feeling people are talking about. So when you're at home, you know it by its simplicity, and then when you're away, you know that you're not home. So that all there is to do is look in the direction of home, and you know, see it where you see it. See it where you see it. Don't worry about where you don't see it yet.
It will come in time. It's just like little steps when you're a baby. You take little steps to begin with, and the end product is that you begin to walk. But before you can take the little steps, you'll learn to crawl and move about a bit, and then, you know, the end result when you're walking, you'll finally see where it's all coming from, and it's right in the front of you in your grasp. And you'll know when you've got it. It's somebody can't just give it to you. You have to be there yourself. It's like we can tell you about a book we've read, but unless you've read it, you don't understand it in the same way, if that makes any more sense.
But you just look in the direction of where you already see your well-being, because it's there.
Thank you. What I think I hear you guys saying, the common theme is to feel my way into it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking the question. And it's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Yeah. So we've got a question to Becky. I'm going to go to 9:15, if that's okay with everyone. And if you need to leave, just leave. But we've got a few people asking questions. So I'm going to go Nikki, then I'm going to go Juliet, then Annette. So Becky, what I heard you say is you change your thought in the moment. Do you perhaps mean changing by choosing? Do you choose different thoughts? Could you elaborate? That would be cool. So what did you mean by change your thought in the moment, Becky?
As in from my old thoughts to my new thoughts. I learnt over a period of time about the meaning of thoughts, and basically I know that I don't have to take my thoughts seriously. I don't let them hold me prisoner. You don't have to let a thought, when you know the nature of thought, that it's not a formless energy. It's nothing. It can go away, and it can thoughts can come and go, just like the clouds do. They appear, but if you look at them, you can focus on one, and you'll see a shape in it. But if you turn your head for a second, it floats away. Thoughts can come and go every day, but you don't have the same thoughts all the time. And it's just knowing that it's okay to let them go. You don't have to take them seriously. And I know that they can just come and go, and I don't have to act on them, or I don't have to follow them. And it's a big thing to be able to do. But also it's the best thing I've ever done. Does that answer your question, or?
Does that help, Nikki?
Can I just add to that? It doesn't. It's not an efforting thing. You haven't got to kind of replace a negative thought with a positive one. As Becky said, it kind of takes care of itself. The mind is a self-clearing mechanism where you just let it do its stuff.
Does that give you somewhere to look, Nikki?
Yeah. So what I got from that is that I hope my battery won't die. Is that you're distinguishing, right? So you're distinguishing the unhelpful thought by getting more familiar with its behavior, I guess, or just oh, here we go again, and then you're becoming aware that you don't have to live there, and also being aware that there's always something else coming that you could follow.
Beautiful. And what you're doing there, right there, Nikki, is you're understanding the nature of thought versus the content of your thinking. And that's the key, understanding the nature of how thought works. And the nature of thought is actually to change, like Andrew said, all on its own. So you definitely got it. You've got it, girl. So Juliet, I just want to give some space to Juliet. Juliet says, it's really hard when I've lost faith. I don't know life without deep depression, and it's hard to believe that it can be any different. So who would like to speak to that? Because I think it is hard when you experience life as a deep depression and to feel like that you can have faith for it to be any different. So which of you three would like to talk to Juliet about that?
Yeah, can I just say a few words, and I'll I think I did feel for large portions of my life that I was just going to be a depressive, and I would put it down to all sorts of factors. My mother's thinking, the fact that she was brought up, illegitimately, all of that sort, and all sorts of excuses. But actually, understanding the nature of thought changed everything for me, because it was all self-created. Totally 100% self-created, and then suddenly I'm the creator, so I'm the change agent. Wow, how freeing is that? So that's and that was just a realization. That's just a momentary realization which could literally change your life.
Mm. And also, you're not. I've been depressed, they say, all my life too, and I'm not now. I don't feel you. It's it must be madness for someone to hear this for the first time, but you can let go of depression. Is, I always think it's like your state of mind anyway, and your state of mind is all your thoughts and how you think about things, and it's believing your own thoughts and your own thinking and getting stuck in them when you can. If you get into the three principles and understand the nature of the principles and nature of the thought, you realise that you're just holding on to the energy and focusing on the thought more, basically, when you don't need to. It's a massive relief.
Yeah, and the problem with depression is that it's the symptoms start to get worrisome of themselves. So your heart starts racing, you can't sleep, and you worry about your worrying.
Yeah.
and it just, the cycle repeats. So just being able to understand the way that thinking happens and thoughts are created can break that cycle. Sorry to interrupt, Becky.
No. I always used to use the glitter ball. You've got a glitter ball, and we shake it, and then all the bits that are inside or a snow dome, and all the bits that are inside there are all your thoughts going through in your head, every millimetre of a second. And if you stop the ball, the snow dome, for 1 second, and you let them fall to the floor, all the bits, you see clarity, and that's when you've got time for new thoughts. Sometimes when there's too much going on in your head, you've got too many thoughts going on, you can't let new thoughts, you can't have clear thoughts going through because your head's too messed up with other stuff going on. And sometimes you need that break also. And the more you look into the principles and the nature of your own thoughts, the more you get to understand it, and the more the weight lifts off your shoulders. And believe me, I've had it for 40 odd years, and it's a fantastic feeling to be able to do that, and to be able to release from your feelings and your insecurities and your thoughts and what people tell you.
I'm going to suggest, I've sent a link out to everybody on the chat. That's the podcast. I recommend you listen to, especially the one on depression from Dr. Bill. It's very powerful. Also, Juliet, if you wanted to let me know, I can put you in touch with any one of our speakers so you can have a longer chat. Yes, I think that, I don't think we've got the time to do it justice today, given what you've said, but any of us would be happy to talk to you after today, support you, and to give you some space to talk through what you need to say as well. But what we all know, Juliet, is that no matter how rough it seems, no matter how stormy the weather in your head, the sun is there.
Mm. And
you can have faith in that. Even if you can't see it today because the clouds are black, the sun is still there and it will come back.
Yeah.
It is who you are. So, any of us would be delighted to talk to you more about that.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to give Annette a chance to ask her question. So go for it, Annette. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just, when Pete was mentioning his experience in walking through the forest, it came into my mind an old friend of mine who was diagnosed as a schizophrenic. And she was very much in opposition to this diagnosis, because for her it was all a connection with the divine or with God. And she was telling me how she would just be walking in the woods and not knowing where she was going when she was in this mental institution, and she would walk around and God would lead her to you know, find a way. And I often have been wondering about, you know, what is true, you know, her version of having a life connection and being diagnosed as a schizophrenic. And sometimes I've always felt that it's been hard to know what's true in a way. And I'm just curious if you have any comments to that.
Sometimes when I'm out in the woods, it feels like heaven. And to me, that is our natural state, that it's almost like we are on heaven and on earth. But because we overthink, which causes all this lack of connection and all these illnesses, I think that really that what your friend's seeing is like she's out and she's seeing God. That's probably nearer to reality than the fiction that we've sort of been brought up to believe with all the analysis that we have. Although it can be dangerous. I mean, if someone speaks to her and it's an imaginary thing, that could be dangerous. But just feeling connected to nature, I don't think in itself is a problem. Needs to be a problem. So
she was saying how she had this kind of online connection with God.
Yeah. See, it's quite, because I had one of those moments where I was walking in a park in Coventry, and it did seem that I was in heaven. And I did go back to the doctor, and he said, "No, don't worry about that. That's just your mind slowing down. All the clutter's going, and you're just seeing a bit clearer now." Because I thought it's like an hallucination or something. But no, I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad thing. But I mean, I would say listening to voices and believing those that's not helpful. So I think you just got to find a balance, really.
Well,
she enjoys being in that state.
I'm looking very much forward to sharing this new understanding with her. And
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, Dr. Bill's last 2 sessions ago was on schizophrenia. So, I think what Dr. Bill would say is that everything is created through the power of thought. 100% our experience. So we are all doing our own personal thinking that creates our experience moment by moment, and that's what's made real to us. So that's what's happening for her and for you and for me, and that it all is powered by divine mind. And I think the other thing I've heard Dr. Bill say, it's in the feeling. So when you feel not separate and at one, that's our true spiritual nature right there. And if that's what her experience is and she feels at one, then that's her tapping into our true spiritual nature, where there's only one of us. Yeah. So it always works the same way for everyone. And labels are nothing more than thought, habits of thought, nothing more and nothing less. So I don't know if that helps you, but thank you. Thank you so much. Look, I don't want to end, but I feel like we have to because I already 15 minutes late. So, so I just want to thank our beautiful speakers tonight and for sharing their heart and their story so openly and generously. And they're also available after today so just let me know, send me an email, talk to me on Facebook. I will put you in touch. We've already had one person show up as interested. So these guys will talk to you and just be a listening ear. And I just want to, anybody listening, really offer you the hope that no matter how dark the night gets, the sun does rise, and it will always, it is there right now. And I really appreciate your own experience right now. You can know that there is well-being that's available to you, because we've heard that today from people who really were lost in their dark night too. So thank you again, and I'll kind of unmute you all to say good night, and we'll be back again in January with Dr. Bill with mental disabilities in January the 11th. So if you want to listen in on that series, but so I'll unmute you all and say good night and thank you for joining us. Good night.